Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi alladhi allama bil qalam. Allama al-insana ma lam ya'lam. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa alihi wa sallam. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal 'asr. Innal insana lafi khusr. إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. وقال تعالى: يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. In the name of God, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer, we begin this sacred moment of Salatul Jummah, the Friday prayer, with the remembrance that 4 weeks ago we started this series of reflections with thinking about the land that we walk upon, how we share this space, whether we are in the masjid or whether in the city of Oakland or we're in the East Bay in general, Alameda County, Contra Costa County. It's part of Allah's creation and it has a history, and we have part of our moral responsibility is to this place because that's where we are on earth right now. In a way that, as I mentioned, just as an example, assuming that nobody here has family in Tajikistan or close friends in Tajikistan, I could be wrong, but we're not necessarily morally obliged to be worried about Tajikistan at this particular moment, or Ecuador, or somewhere else. Maybe you have family or friends there, so you do, but so that brought us to the second week when we talked about family and how each and every single one of us comes from a mother and a father and therefore are embedded in a system of human relations designed by Allah for us to actually come into this world, and that our ethical responsibilities are centered in certain ways around that lineage that we come from, and the mothers and fathers, grandfathers and grandmothers, brothers and sisters, and so on and so forth. But then last week we switched gears because our brother Sayyid Abu Hassan Mukhtabad, rahmatullahi alayhi, may Allah have mercy on him, passed away unexpectedly, and who was always in attendance here at this Salatul Jummah, the age of 53. And so we reflected upon the reality of death and the reality that as part of our individual journey, right? It's not, the land is not going to come with us and our families are not going to come with us necessarily. It's a journey that we take alone, and it's something that we need to prepare for. And to also, we were thinking about calling blessings down upon our brother, Sayyid Abu Hassan Mukhtabad. May Allah have mercy on him. There is a GoFundMe to raise money for his daughter's college, since he passed away unexpectedly early in life. So if you want access to the GoFundMe, Brother Payman, who's the chairman of the masjid, can give you the link where you can make a donation to support his family. And there will also be a memorial service from here on Sunday between 3 and 5. We will reflect on our brother's life and recite Quran for him, and hopefully share in our grief together. So today, what I want to talk about is the fact that although we may share all these things may be part of our constituent realities as human beings, it is also true that we may find ourselves anywhere on this earth at any given moment in time. And we may be here in Oakland now, and we may be maybe, for example, close and connected to our families right now, but maybe next week we'll be in Tajikistan, or we'll be in Ecuador, and we will have new situations that confront us in each single moment, each single waqt, each single moment of time. And there's this idea that the Muslim is ibn al-waqt, that they are the child of the moment, right? Because it is in the moment that we face our Lord. It is in every moment that we discern our moral accountability, right? The Quran says, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. يا أيها الذين آمنوا استجيبوا لله وللرسول إذا دعاكم لما يحييكم واعلموا أن الله يحول بين المرء وقلبه وأنه إليه تحشرون. O you who claim to believe, respond to God and the messenger when they call you to that which gives you life. And know that God intervenes between a human being and their heart, for surely you will be gathered back to Allah. This is in the 8th chapter of Surah Al-Anfal, verse 24. So the verse begins, O you who claim to believe, i.e. all of us who are Muslims, who are gathered here on the day of Jummah, who are saying, we are responding to the call of Allah and His Messenger. It's saying, respond when they call you to that which gives you life. For Allah is Al-Hayy. Allah is life itself. There is no life without Allah. And Allah is Al-Muhyi. He's the one that gives life to us. He creates this world. He creates the seas and the land and the heavens, time and space. And then He allows us to participate in it, for He is Al-Muhyi, the giver of life. And so what this verse is saying is that when Allah and His Messenger are calling you something, they're calling you to an even greater participation in this life, an even a greater connection to Al-Hayy, the living, to life itself. Right? We say in English, I feel so alive, right? To indicate like we just, every moment of every part of ourselves and every moment that we're in, we feel alive, we feel present, we feel like everything's working together, right? And that's what Allah is calling us to in this world and in the next. When we think about our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, may peace and blessings be upon him and his family, we think of someone who is truly alive in the full sense of the word and the term. And it says, and know that God intervenes between a human being and their heart. And there are various explanations of the meaning of this, but essentially it means that Allah is with you wherever you may be, right? You are always with yourself. You are always with your own heart and mind, right? And Allah is right there with you as well. Whether you be in Oakland, California, or in Tajikistan, or in Ecuador, or wherever you may be on the planet Earth, for surely you will be gathered back to Allah. And no matter how much you wander and roam, no matter how much you travel, come this way and you go that way, you go left, you go right, you go up, you go down, you have moments of happiness and moments of sadness. At the end of the day, inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. We will be brought back. Islam, to surrender, is to voluntarily surrender out of the recognition that one day we won't have a choice but to surrender. So we take that moment of gratitude and we turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wherever we may find ourselves. So when we think about Islam this way, we realize that it has to allow us to succeed wherever we may be upon the planet Earth. It can't be necessarily that we all have to go to one place in order to succeed. Yes, Allah has called all of us to a journey to Mecca once in our lifetime, if we have the health and if we have the political access, because maybe we're not living under a situation where the government isn't allowing us, and we have to have the wealth in order to pay for that. Right? And if we have all those conditions are fulfilled, and we are an adult and we are Muslim and we are sane, then yes, we're all called to journey to Mecca for the Hajj once in our lifetime. Right? But maybe I go this year and maybe you go 10 years from now. Right? It's something that happens every year, but it's not something we necessarily all do collectively. Right? And similarly, none of us is at this moment, although we are brought here for these 30, 45 minutes, an hour to be together for Allah. At the end of the day, you're all going to go back to wherever you're from with your families, your jobs, your friends, and you are going to be responsible for your own heart. And I'm going to be responsible for my own heart. Right? So this verse is reminding us that no matter where we are and where we find ourselves, Allah is there with us. Right? Whether it's a Muslim country, Muslim majority country, or it's a non-Muslim country, a Muslim minority country. Right? I prefer the term Muslim majority country and Muslim minority country. So America is a Muslim minority country, Egypt's a Muslim majority country. I don't like Muslim, non-Muslim, right? Because I'm a Muslim living in this country, right? So it's not a non-Muslim country in that sense, it's a Muslim minority country. Anyways, so, wherever you are on the planet Earth, right? If you are hanging out with your Muslim brothers, you're hanging out with people of other faiths. Allah is there with you, right? And our understanding of our responsibilities as Muslims, our way of responding to Allah and His Messenger when they call us that which gives us life, has to be rooted in that reality, so that we're not fearful of our Islam, right? For many decades in America, people have been fearful that they will lose their religion, right? If they somehow let things out. They open up the borders. They, allow people to do what they want. But the reality is, as I mentioned in previous khutbahs, is that people can do what they want, right? When I was a chaplain at universities on the East Coast, I had students that sometimes disobeyed their parents to come to those universities. But then they wanted to reconcile that choice with their Islam and their faith, and they came to talk to me, right? So they ran away from what they thought they were running away from, but then they ran right into me, someone who they did not expect to meet. And then it allowed them a new place to reconfigure if they were going to reattach themselves to Islam, right? But in the initial moment, they were free to run away, right? It's not like 15th century world anymore. People can hop on a plane and fly to Canada and seek refuge. And these things happen all the time. And so for our Islam to succeed, it has to succeed anywhere on earth. It has to be a living embodiment of our own awareness that Allah is with us and He intervenes between us and our heart. That Allah is with us, and at every given moment, Allah has opened the doors for us to turn to Allah and to deepen our relationship with Allah. And so in order to quickly explain, I think, a paradigm for how to do that, I need to share a few Arabic terms, which I will translate. The first is taklif, which is moral accountability. This is one of the fundamental ideas of Islamic belief. They'll say, yeah, I believe in Allah and the last day and the prophets. But if you take those three things together, what is that? What is the outcome of that in one row? It's taklif. It's moral accountability. It's that Allah has created us and Allah expects something from us. And He calls us to that, which is going to increase us in all good. But we have to respond, right? It's not compelled upon us. It's something that we are free to choose or to disregard. So taqwa, this famous word from the Quran, taqwa, is the individual's response to that moral accountability. That moment when you're aware that Allah is al-Basir, He's the one who sees all. Allah is al-Raqib, He's the one who's kind of watching. Allah is, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, He's the one who has promised so much mercy to those who call out for His mercy. So in that moment, what do? Right? Do I respond to my parents when they call me? Do I show up at work on time? Do I make my prayers on time? Do I serve my family when they need me? It could be so many different things, right? But the point is that the taqwa is something that you manifest, you bring into being when you, no matter where you are on earth, who you're with, you have that moment of awareness. So in one hadith, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq was asked about the tafsir of taqwa, about tafsir, the explanation of this word taqwa. And he said, the taqwa is that Allah does not miss you where Allah has commanded you to be, and does not see you where Allah has forbidden you from, right? So this whole earth is for us. Every nook and cranny of this earth is for us. But there are times and there are places where we should be there, and there are times and there are places where we should not be there, right? You travel to some of the cities of this earth, and you walk along a street at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, no big deal, just another street. You walk across that street, same street, 12 o'clock at night, you shouldn't be there. As a Muslim, you shouldn't be there. And these places can be found in many cities of planet Earth, including Oakland, California. And so this is Allah reminding us that yes, although the entire earth is spread out before you, you have choices, right? If you want to go to Ecuador and you want to go to Tajikistan or wherever you want to go on planet Earth, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. As long as you're not shirking some other responsibilities and duties you have, go. Experience Allah's creation. Learn about the differences between people and languages and colors, as it says in the Quran. Experience the diversity and the beauty and the majesty of this world, right? But just don't walk down that street at 12 o'clock at night. And make sure you wake up for your prayers. Or whatever it is, when you have those moments of taqwa, right? So our scholars in this Islamic tradition have simplified it for us. We often think of it as a complex thing, but they've simplified for us. And they said, things are not black and white. There are 5 shades. There's black, there's white, and there's 3 shades of gray. if you will. So this concept of the hukum shari, and this is the categorization of human acts into 5 possibilities, right? And most of us are familiar with these terms. There's fard and wajib, which is anything that's obligatory for a sane adult Muslim, right? So for us gathered here, for most of us, that means making the 5 prayers as an example, right? As we talked about before, it doesn't take too much time, maybe 25 minutes out of 24 hours to complete that. The fast of the month of Ramadan, right? If you have to travel during the month of Ramadan and break your fast, no big deal, right? But if you are present, as the Quran says, if you are present to witness the month and the place where you're rooted, the place where you're a resident, then fast. It's simple things, right? If you have certain challenges in your life that we would consider to be forbidden, which is the last category, struggle against those things, make effort. So then we have the mustahab, something that's recommended. This could be so many different things. This could be our brothers and sisters who are so involved in our community and feeding other people in our city, sharing food with other people. This can be smiling in a person's face. This can be saying salam to somebody you don't know. This could be giving sadaqah to somebody on the street. This could be, making tasbihat, saying subhanallah, to yourself quiet. I mean, just a myriad things. But the point is, you don't have to do it, but it's good to do. Then there's the mubah, the neutral. And this is most of the things we do in our lives. We get up and we decide, oh, I want a toast as opposed to an English muffin. Okay, whatever. I mean, maybe you could turn it into something, special. If you're like, well, I'm choosing this toast because this toast is organic and it was ground by my friend who lives and has a farm on the outskirts of Oakland and grows his own wheat, and he says salawat on the Prophet, 1,000 times while he harvests the wheat. And so I'm going to eat this toast as like a state of worship, of ibadah, and of shukr, of gratitude towards Allah. And you could turn it into something super special and spiritual if you want to, but you don't have to. If you're just like, oh, I want the toast and not the English muffin, no big deal. I want to be a doctor, I want to be an engineer, or I want to work for AC Transit, or I want to work for East Bay Mud, or I want to work for Parks and Rec. Okay, ahlan wa sahlan, all beneficial. May Allah bless you in your work. And then you have the makruh, the disliked. Smoking is a good example. That's the standard ruling is that you shouldn't do it. Because over time, it's going to harm your health. But, it's not as bad as other things. And then there's other things, that would fall into this category. And then there's the haram. And we all know what the things are that are haram. So, but the thing is that when we look at this 5-fold categorization, it's actually like a matrix. You could, like a heads-up display, you could put in front of your eyes any given day of the week. And you could be like, dun, 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 if you were like a robot, you'd be like, all right, now I'm like in this situation, what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to work. Okay, that's probably mustahab because you're going to benefit your family by earning this money, and you're going to fulfill your covenants and your promises because you told your employer that you're going to show up at 9 a.m. Right? Like, so, but you don't have to think that way. But the point is, you could think that way and say, how can I maximize the good of every given day? Right? By thinking about it in these 5 categories. Right, and it's same thing with if you were traveling, you were just outside of your normal situation. You were in Ecuador and you're in the mountains. You said, you know what, I'm going to go out today and I really want to see the beautiful mountains and the trees, and I want to reflect on Allah's beauty and majesty in the creation. And the Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, the rest of the day could be considered ibadah, could be considered worship, because you're reflecting upon the beauty of Allah's creation. You're having an awesome time. It's nothing to do with like, oh, I got to go to the masjid and make my prayers, or, oh, I'm doing something haram and I really should give it up. No, you're actually having an amazing, awesome time, but you've just thought about it in a different way, right? And so this paradigm helps us to sort of categorize our life and to think about how we can make the most of it. And it also, what it does is when we have a difficult situation, then we can actually try to sort of fit it into one of those situations or those categories, right? So we have a moral struggle. What exactly is it, right? So, for example, one of the things that happens all the time with converts is that they make something that is mustahab, something that is recommended, or something that is makruh, something that is disliked, way too important, and they struggle with it way too much to the point of burning themselves out because it's not actually something they have to do, right? Like, I'll give you an example. It's kind of a funny example. When I was an early Muslim, but just, I don't think these things happen too often, but I mean, I think converts have like a certain zeal, and I've had certain people around me that maybe weren't the most wise. So I was hanging out with some Muslim brothers. Like, I had been Muslim for probably like 4 months at this point. And they're like, do we tell them about the hadith? And I was like, well, what are you guys talking about? And they're like, and they busted out this hadith from one of the, the books of hadith about the certain characteristics, like bodily characteristics that all the prophets, had. And one of them involved plucking your underarm hairs out. Now, I don't know like what the rulings are on this particular thing. So don't even, think about it as something you're going to act on until you would like go discuss with somebody more knowledgeable than me. My point is to say that I was a new Muslim, and these guys were like, there's this hadith that says you got to pluck your underarm hairs out. Like, and that's the sunnah, right? I.e., that's mustahab, that's something that's recommended. But there was no sense of like, maybe that's not important for me to do right now. I was like, no, this is the sunnah, and you got to do it. So I literally went home to my parents' house, and I was standing in the mirror going like, oh, why do I have to do this? This is ridiculous, right? But those things happen all the time in this religion, right? In this community. And people get like terrible advice about what the things that are supposed to focus on for their moral development. Like I could barely, say Qul huwallahu ahad, and then someone's telling me I'm gonna be plucking my underarm hairs out, like ridiculous. But I didn't know any better. I didn't know how to filter these things because I wasn't educated enough at the point in order to be able to sort of say, I don't think I should do that, because these were like my closest Muslim friends at the time who were like advising me. So may Allah reward them for their intention. So this categorization helps us to actually make our lives easier, right? Because then it helps us to prioritize. Because the whole idea is that like you start on the edges and then you work your way in. You don't burn yourself out with things that aren't absolutely have to do, when you have other things to worry about. Right. So some people, for example, like they just go way too far in extra worship when they really got other things they got to deal with in terms of how they treat their family, in terms of, how they're showing up for work and doing their work. And that's where they should really be putting their efforts in, as opposed to just something that it would just be recommended in the religious law. Right. But these things are also not just about us. They're about other people. And so there's another 5 things to think about when you're reflecting upon this. And the whole idea is that you could be in any situation on planet Earth, and these things would be beneficial for you. You could be totally by yourself, no other Muslims around, and these things would still be operative for you to help figure out maybe how to figure out your way out of a moral conundrum that you might find yourself in. And this other term is called maqasid al-sharia, which are essentially the long-term social goals that these rulings, these hukm shari rulings, are supposed to achieve. Right? It's not just about you, like as if Islam is just like you and like struggling with yourself. It also has like this idea of it's supposed to bring into existence a more beneficial social existence even here on planet Earth. So these are something that many scholars have talked about, but essentially to make it simple, is they talk about that all these rules, when you look at them collectively and socially, they have 5 main goals. And that's the preservation of life, the preservation of property, the preservation of religion, the preservation of intellect, and the preservation of lineage. Okay? So life is, for example, that all life is inherently sacred in Islam. And when it was only allowed to take a life under certain conditions, and even animal life, right? So people often, want to debate like halal meat stuff. The core idea, from my understanding, and maybe you could disagree, but the core idea is this idea that even that life is sacred, even though it's not a human being. And so if you're going to take it, you have to do it under the right conditions and in the right way with the right attitude. You can debate the fiqh of it. I'm not a faqih, but the point is that like, you don't just create a mass slaughterhouse and start cutting up the meat. Here's your cheeseburger, right? It's like, that's a living being that Allah created. I've done it before. I did aqiqah, for my son, and I Bismillah Allahu Akbar for two sheep, and then watched the process whereby they, broke the animal down into as much meat as they could, and then they had other stuff that you can't use, like the guts, and then they gave that away to other people. It's like there was something really special about that, to really be connected to the process of making halal meat and recognizing that it's also a beautiful animal too. And if you were gonna, you don't have to eat meat, right? It's not nothing that's like wajib for you to eat meat. But if you choose to eat meat, you should do so in this sort of ethical and spiritual way, right? And then, so obviously, if we have that attitude towards animals, then we should have a similar attitude towards human beings. In terms of property, right? We know, for example, people often, talk about like the classical rulings of stealing and the punishments for stealing. Well, one way of looking at that is that people's property is so sacred that it's driving home the point. Whether or not you could actually convict somebody of that, that crime, for example, under classical Sharia rules is like a whole different discussion. But the point is that it indicates that people's property is their own, and it's serious, their house, their car. And we live in a city where people's cars are broken into all the time because people don't take property seriously. But that's really important for us to uphold and to remember, is that, if it's yours, it's yours. Right? I was even told by one of my teachers that I should not look in the books of other people without asking them their permission first. Right? Because maybe they've written notes in it. Maybe they have like a love letter stuffed in there. And I open it, oh, this looks like an interesting book. Oh, awkward. Right? Like it's theirs. It's their stuff. If you want to go look on their books, like say, hey, can I look at this book? Oh, yeah, sure, no problem. Right? So respect other people's property. And then religion, right? It's not just Islam, it's other religions too. Right? That our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his Sharia was to protect churches and to protect synagogues, right? And to make sure that they, were also places where Allah's name was mentioned, as it says in the Quran, right? So even though we often think of religious freedom and, freedom of worship as sort of something that came with the Enlightenment in Europe in the last couple hundred years, but we have our own tradition of honoring other people's faiths and recognizing that just as we want our masajid to be preserved from harm, right? There was a masjid, and unfortunately, sometimes there are our own co-religionists that blow up the masjid. Actually, probably more often if you look at statistically. There was just a masjid in Pakistan earlier this week where over 100 people were killed in a suicide bomber from the Pakistani Taliban went off. So, I mean, like that's a complete violation of property, of life, of religion, and so on and so forth. It's violating every single almost element of the Maqasid al-Sharia at one time, right? So just as we want our masajid to be safe, so we want your church to be safe and your synagogue to be safe and so on. And then intellect, right? So like, why are there rules against, alcohol and weed and other things like that? It's because to preserve our intellect, preserve the normal state of our intellect. And there's, because the entire edifice of our religious teaching is based on people who have reason, have aql, and can hear the call of Allah and His Messenger, understand it properly in their mind, and thus, respond to that which is going to give them life. And then lastly, lineage, right? Is this idea that we talked about before. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam could name his forefathers going back so many generations. Right? And so this is part of Arab culture that Islam wanted to both preserve and make universal. But you cannot find anything comparable in this world to the Sayyids. You cannot find in any community on this world millions of people that can trace their lineage back 1400 years to Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein, and thus to Sayyidah Fatima, and thus to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? There's just nothing like it. There's nothing, in no time in human history has there ever been lineage so well preserved across so much time and space by so many people as the Sayyids of our community. And that's a beautiful thing, right? And that is the living instantiation and embodiment of this idea of the Maqasid al-Sharia, right? But it shouldn't be just for the Sayyid. It should be for everybody. And as we talked about, unfortunately, there have been systemic injustices and oppressions that have made it impossible for some people to know who their fathers are, right? And there's no blame upon anyone for that situation, and we need to be all part of rectifying that situation to the extent possible, right? But the idea is that that lineage is truly important. And knowing your family, knowing where you came from, right? Even if you end up becoming adopted by somebody else, right? You still should still know who your forefathers were biologically, and that's important. So these are 5 things we can reflect upon in any given situation and think about, well, yeah, like I want to do what's right, but I also want to think about how it impacts other people. How does it achieve these larger goals, right? How does it make the world a better place? Is simply put. When I look at these 5 maqasid al-Sharia, preserving life, property, religion, intellect, and lineage, I think that any sort of social system and any sort of encouragement to certain morals that brings about those things, that's a good thing, right? By my reason, not by some hadith or some verse of Quran, but just by my reason to think that those are things that are actually beneficial for humanity at large. So if inshallah ta'ala we can do that, that not only will we have a moral compass that will guide us as individuals no matter where we find ourselves on earth, but we will also have a morality that is collective and communal in its expression. And when we have moments where we might not sure what the right thing to do is, if we actually think about it in terms of these 5 larger goals of the Sharia, then inshallah it will become clear to us what the best way of living our lives could be. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم وصلى الله على محمد وآله وسلم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد وقال تعالى يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. So when talking about these things, sometimes people will mention this word called taqleed, which means following someone else's rulings in the religious matters. Now, taqleed is just recognition that sometimes you need help, right? The most common metaphor that is given is doctors, right? So, well, doctors have to spend their whole lives studying a certain subject in order to be a benefit to people when they need it. But what is often not said is that people don't always need doctors. A lot of the times people got to just take care of themselves on their own. A lot of the time you're the one who's responsible for your health. You got to wake up and eat the healthy thing for breakfast and not the bad thing for breakfast. You're the one who's got to decide if you're going to exercise your body or you're just going to sit on the couch. You're the one who's got to choose how you're going to live your life. Right? But the doctor is there if you're confused. The doctor is there if you need advice. And the doctor is there if you need something special that you can't do for yourself, right? And so that helps us put things in perspective. And we come to Salatul Jummah, 30 minutes, thinking about how to live our lives, reflecting upon it. Hopefully something I've said has been beneficial. But you are going to be the one for the rest, every single 24-hour period, whether you're asleep or you're awake, whether you're silent or you're speaking, whether you're moving or you're standing still, whether you're in the East Bay or you're in Ecuador, Tajikistan, you're the one who's going to be with you in your heart. And you're going to be the doctor for your own heart. You're going to be the one who's going to try and give it what it needs and keep it from what's going to harm it. And so, yes, we need doctors, but we don't need them all the time. And we can't rely upon doctors to do for us what we need to do for ourselves. You don't call the doctor every morning and say, hey, doc, should I take my pills now? He said, I already told you to take your pills. Okay, just take your pills. Hey, doc, I was thinking of having orange juice or milk. What should I do? Hey, doc, what job should I do? Doctor's like, what are you talking about? What job should you do? Like, just do something that's healthy. I'm a doctor, right? So it's like, what job? You're asking a scholar, like, what job you're going to do? Like, do something that's beneficial, that's halal, that you like, that's going to help pay for your family's, needs, right? Sometimes we have some extremes in our community, people that are overly reliant upon ulama and people who never consult ulama at all, right? I think there's a healthy middle where you You recognize that, we all have a responsibility to be for ourselves, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has asked us to be. And no one's going to do it for us. Obviously we all need help. We all need inspiration. We all need support. But at the end of the day, each and every single one of us, as I said, is going to leave this room and go out there in the world, and that'll be all on you. And hopefully something that I've said has been beneficial to help you as you go through your struggles. I'm just trying to share what has been helpful to me as I've gone through my struggles. I'll end with the reality is that you will fail. You will fail. Maybe once a week, maybe every day, maybe once a month. I can't say, but you will fail. And that failure will either become from making a mistake or because you know what the right thing is to do, but you're just pulled in a different direction. And that's okay. Right? That's why Allah is at-Tawwab ar-Rahim. At-Tawwab means he's constantly turning. Obviously, Allah doesn't know direction, but like this idea, like you're constantly turning to meet somebody and accept them. Right? Tawbah is to turn. So at-Tawwab is like intensively and constantly turning, i.e., every moment with your heart, Allah is there to be at-Tawwab. He is there to turn to meet you and to welcome you back and to make you feel safe and to comfort you and to inspire you to say, you can keep doing this. You can do this. I believe in you. I trust you. Right? Because Allah did not create us, to give up. Allah created us to keep staying in the game and see how far we get. Right? As we said, our brother Sayyid Abu Hassan Mukhtabad, his story is over. And our story will all end at one day too. So let's just keep on trying. We got another week ahead of us. Alhamdulillah, may Allah bless all of you in this week, and may bless all of your families and your employers and your friends and your neighbors. And may we find inspiration and excitement on the adventure of life and the challenges that we may face, but also the opportunities that are before us that can lead us to ever greater beauty. And as we say, open this khutbah with, that we are trying to feel alive. We are trying to feel like we are really alive. We are filled with Al-Muhyi, the one who gives life, and he's calling us to eternal life. And we responded in this moment, and may Allah bless us through this moment in the week ahead. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. Our Lord, give us good in this world and good in the hereafter, and save us from the punishment of the fire. رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا سُبْحَانَكَ فَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. Our Lord, you have not created all of this in vain, but glory be to you. Please save us from the punishment of the fire. رَبَّنَا إِنَّنَا آمَنَّا فَاغْفِرْ لَنَا ذُنُوبَنَا وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. Our Lord, we believe in you, and we ask for forgiveness for the things that we've done wrong. So please forgive us and save us from any punishment. Ya Allah, you are Arhamar Rahimeen. You are the most merciful of those who show mercy. So we turn to you in this moment, seeking that mercy, knowing that there's no one that can give us that mercy except you. Not our mothers, not our fathers, not our employees, not our husbands, not our wives, not our children. Ya Allah, only you. You are always at Tawwab, and you are always ready for us to return. So Ya Allah, in this moment, we turn our hearts towards you, and we thank you for existence, and we thank you for this day of Jummah. We thank you for this masjid. We thank you for this congregation, and we thank you for the blessing of life. And we ask that you fill us with more life in the week to come. Ya Hayy Ya Muhyi, La ilaha illa ant, subhanak inni kuntu min al-zalimin. Wa salli ala Muhammadin wa alihi at-tahirin wa aqimu as-salat. Let the prayer begin.